Welcome back to Hoopsville. I'm your host, Dave McHugh, on this season debut of the 2013-14 season. Don't forget you can interact with us using Twitter at D3Hoopsville or using the hashtag Hoopsville. Also go to Facebook.com/Hoopsville. Email us at hoopsville@d3hoops.com. There's also a chat room alongside the show. I think you get the point. It's all about Hoopsville. We're now at the Mazer Center at Franklin and Marshall, and we're talking to men's basketball committee chair Steve Ulrich, who is also the committee, or I should say the conference commissioner for the Centennial Conference. Of course, Franklin and Marshall is part of that conference, and thus we are here at the Mazer Center here in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And first and foremost, Steve, thanks for joining us here on the first show of the season.
Oh, thanks for inviting me, Dave. Glad to be here.
Great. Listen, you've been on the committee a few years. Now you have your opportunity at being a chair, and as a result, we put you in the hot seat. We're going to grill you with some questions. But first and foremost, what are you looking forward to? What kind of step us into you becoming the chair?
It's been an interesting 2 years for me on the committee. We've had a number of transitory moves. We've had committee members come and go. Their term has expired, and as it turned out, after 2 years, I was the seasoned veteran of the group, and discussed it with the 5 committee members that were going to be remaining, and they thought that I would be the best for the position, and I graciously accepted. I'm really excited. This is an opportunity that I've been looking forward to, and hopefully we can best serve men's basketball in Division III.
Of course, you mentioned the 5 coming back. You know, you had 2 years experience into your third. Everybody else has 1 or maybe 2 years of experience. Of course, some of them won't get their full 4. They're filling in for roles that were already kind of in place, kind of an interim basis, as it were. So a lot of changeover with this committee in the last couple of years. Consistency seems to have stayed in the mentality, but how hard is that to get those who are coming in new, or to get those who are coming in completely fresh to understand what the goals have been of this committee over the last, say, 3, 4, even 5 years?
I know that the veterans on the committee my first year did a very good job of bringing me up to speed, and I think that's one of the challenges for the 3 new members. And some of the other returners are just in their second year. So last year, certainly with the whirlwind that took place with Atlanta and everything that went on with that, that was such a new and different experience for them to be part of all of that. So really it's getting back to what I learned in year 1, bringing everyone up to speed in terms of, okay, how are we going to do the selections? How are we going to pick the best teams, the best Pool C teams? How we're going to do the bracket? This year that we're back to a pre-Atlanta
regular bracket,
a regular three-week bracket, and with all the constraints that come in from the NCAA and flights and the like. So we had some education to do.
To put you on the spot a little bit, I hope you got it memorized. Who's the rest of this committee?
The rest of the committee, forgive me guys if I make Jeff Burns at Randolph-Macon, Mike Tully at Roger Williams, Bob McVean at RIT. We have Brian Van Haften at Buena Vista. Sorry, Brian.
You got it. It's all right. I do the same thing. They all know that.
Linda Bruno is a new member, the commissioner of the Skyline Commons. Kevin Vandestreek from Calvin. I'm drawing a blank here. And George Barber at Greenville are the newest members. So.
When we look at this committee, and I think something that people need to stress, you're not a basketball guy. You're a conference commissioner with no basketball experience, but I mean no coaching experience. But that's supposed to be the makeup. You're supposed to go this kind of 4-4 split, 4 coaches, 4 administrators. Of course, there's ways of, Mike DeWitt could be, last year I think was considered an administrator, even though he's a basketball coach. But you've got that. Jeff Burns is an AD at Randolph-Macon. You've got the Skyline representative as well. Tell us about that balance and why the NCAA seems to make that so important, and how that kind of comes into play.
I think when you look at the 50-50 split, the coaches are the ones that are the day-to-day operations. They know how coaches think, what they see on the court. They can break down film, tell us about teams that they've seen. They have lines of communications that are very valuable for the administrators. I think the administrators bring, in some respects, a bigger picture view of everything. We're not only focused on just one sport, although when you're on a committee, certainly you're asked just to deal with men's basketball. I know as a commissioner, my job is to work with 11 colleges and 24 sports. So you have to be careful not to focus on one sport and one school at any one time. So I think the mix of the day-to-day expertise that the coaches bring and a broader view of the operations of Division III or conferences or institutions that administrators bring makes it a fine mix.
The interesting twist here is the Skyline Commissioner coming in has Division I background to the point that she's been on that committee,
yes,
who's chosen the D1, March Madness, as it were. I know it's early in the process, but what dynamic does that bring to the table?
One of the nice things about being a commissioner is I've had the opportunities to work with Linda in a role with the Commissioners Association. And I think her experience and what she's going to bring to the conversation, I think, will be valuable. She knows what it's like to be in the room selecting the teams and doing the bracketing. So although we need to talk about what are the goals for the regional advisory committees and what we're going to do as a national committee and maybe break a mold of what she knew in Division I think she's going to shed a great new light on everything we do.
Maybe some diversity that you guys don't even see coming.
Absolutely.
The committee over the last 3, 4, 5 years, even longer, has really stepped it up, as it were, and we have seen monumental changes. I'm not talking about the criteria necessarily or the secondary criteria, but the decisions made and the diversity, as I mentioned, of the tournament. Had a little bit of a step back a couple of years ago, but it seems like we're heading back in the right direction. With that loaded statement ahead of you, what are your goals? What is your mentality to try and keep what I call that momentum moving forward?
I think we made a lot of good strides. Last year we built upon what I learned in year one. And I think we want to make sure that we're able to provide, come bracket time, the opportunity for schools who don't normally see each other during the regular season to have that opportunity to meet in the tournament, because you'll hear from the students that they enjoy the national flavor of the tournament. Even for our conference here in the Centennial, for Dickinson to have the opportunity to play Marietta last year was something you don't see the OAC and the Centennial cross paths. So I think we want to be cognizant of that type of matchup when it comes to bracketing, certainly understanding the rules and constraints that were placed under by the national office with flights and the like. But I think that's valuable. I think it makes the experience even more special for the students.
To quickly dive into that, a couple of years ago, many feel was the step back. That was your first year. Last year, you have the Atlanta scenario, 6-week tournament. First, one game a week for a segment there, then the Elite Eight in Salem, then a week off. You haven't had what maybe is a normal year in my determination. This year is kind of what that is. Is it almost like it's a whole new year for you?
Yes, absolutely. Between the youth, if you will, of the committee and the fact that we've gone from such a high last year, being part of the 75th anniversary, back to what most of us have known and loved over the past, the fact that a lot of us haven't experienced that is really going to be a challenge. But I think it's what our group's up to.
Talking to Steve Ulrich, who is committee chair for the men's basketball committee this year in Division III. Of course, he's also commissioner for the Centennial Conference. We're here at Franklin and Marshall taping this for our season debut of Hoopsville. I want to thank those here at Franklin and Marshall for helping us out. Let's get to some of the questions that we have heard via Twitter, email, and the thread on d3boards.com. Some of these are obvious questions. They may be a little out of order, so I apologize now as I was writing them down. But let's get to some of these questions we've heard, and it's really questions that every committee chair kind of has to tackle. First and foremost, what is the mandate to the regional advisory committees? We heard over the years that, hey, your region, go ahead, kind of pick the best teams that you have, we'll add some input. Then we heard, listen, you got to stick to the criteria. If we don't feel you're sticking to the criteria, we're going to make changes. But I also have heard it kind of a hybrid of both. What is the mandate from your point of view to these RACs? And I know you've already talked to your RACs. What's the mandate from them? What should they be doing when they make their regional rankings? What should they be looking at when they look at teams in their own regions?
First thing they need to do is, as you said, they need to know their region. They have to know the teams in their conference to be able to represent the conference and to be able to speak to that when it comes to the RAC calls that we have weekly. At that point, you need to take a look at the criteria, and we need to follow that. But I also think it's important to dive a little deeper. You'll get some coaches may look at the opponent's winning percentage and the opponent's winning percentage that comprise the strength of schedule and think that that's 3 different categories that, oh, here's a check for us, here's another check for us, oh, we win 3, when it's only the strength of schedule that matters. So you need to be aware of that. We need to make sure they understand. But you also need to be able to sift through and say, for example, okay, this was a quality win against the regional opponent, non-conference, on the road. What does that mean? Does that give you a little extra when all is said and done? How do you do against teams that are above 500? When you're splitting hairs and trying to slot teams in the proper spot, I think that's important too. So we want to make sure that they feel that they have some latitude within the criteria to provide the national committee with the best regional rankings possible.
I was going to say, back to those results versus regionally ranked opponents, some people look at them as hard numbers. 12-5 means 12-5. If it's a team that was 6-2, well, there's your difference. But you're saying they could even go deeper into that, say, well, 12-5, but the 5 losses were to number 1 teams, or the 12 wins were, against so-and-so and so-and-so, and that means more than the guys 6-2 and their low-level regional ranked opponents. So if you're getting to a point where you really have to split hairs, as you point out, they can dive into those numbers a little bit more.
I think it's incumbent upon us to do that. To be fair to everyone is to take a deeper look at what it really means. When you talk about record versus regionally ranked teams, I've always been concerned about that. When you look at a region like New England has 75 schools, the Atlantic region has 31. Well, by nature, if you're ranking 12 teams in the New England region, you're going to have more opportunities to play regionally ranked opponents than anyone in the NJAC or the CUNY or what the Skyline would have. So I think we owe it to the teams that are under consideration to scratch beneath the surface.
Of course, we should point out also that the regions will be shaken up a little bit next year. We already know about that. New England won't change much, but the Atlantic and Mid-Atlantic and the others and East will get to even themselves out a little bit again. Talking with Steve Ulrich here, men's committee chair. Back to since we're off onto the results versus regionally ranked opponents tact here, there was a lot of talk after last year of scrapping the once ranked, always ranked mentality. Randolph-Macon certainly benefited from that. They played more regionally ranked opponents than maybe their schedule could even technically allow. I think they only played 3 teams that weren't regionally ranked. But there was an adage, that first year it came out, it was if you're ranked one week, if you're not ranked the next, and so teams were taking hits because a team went through a bad streak. But then the last few years, it doesn't matter if you've been ranked in the first one or the last one. But that's also a reason why we've gotten less regional rankings, because they didn't want that extra week of regionally ranked opponent data. What's the scenario now? We know football got rid of it. Basically, the once ranked, always ranked. What's the scenario in basketball this year?
Men's basketball has done the same. We will only take a look at the opponents you play that are in the last.
So we've gone back to the original way.
Correct.
Is there a downfall with that? And this will get back to our transparency question down the road. But is there a downfall with that because people don't know where they're going to stand, especially going into that last regional ranking?
I'm not sure if it's a downfall per se. I think, this is speculation on my part, but, the NCAA has done a great deal of work to get their computer systems to a point where for regional advisory committees and national committees, it's great. The toggle switches, you're just pushing buttons and you're getting information that in years past may not have been available to you. So the idea of once ranked, always ranked may have just been out of simplicity. But now I don't think it's so much of a downfall. And I think if a committee is on top of its game, and this is important, if a committee is on top of its game, the regional advisory committee knows what their role is, what the criteria the national committee asks of them, I don't think it's a hardship at all.
2 quick questions along the same round. Has there been ever talk, I know you and I talked about it after last year, of twice ranked, always ranked? So if a team has really been that consistent, there are that many regional rankings, then you get the benefit of getting that on your record.
That's something that has not come up in formal discussions. I think this year we're looking at the getting rid of once ranked, always ranked, and seeing how that works. But I think that might be something that would be on the table in future years.
And then in the future as well, probably, because I suspect it's not for this year, how about an extra regional ranking? How about one more in January? Where it used to be there were 6. Now we're down to 3. They're all in February. No one really understands where they're sitting until it's late in the season. Has there been talk, since we got rid of this once ranked, always ranked, of adding one more regional ranking, at least at the beginning, so people understand the scenarios and what's going on?
There has been some talk about that, and I think we're trying to work with the Division III Championships Committee in Indianapolis, and they're setting the the bar for us in some respects, and I think we'd like to provide more information to the fans of Division III basketball early. And I think also, as you mentioned, it's the men's basketball committee's position that we should release the final regional rankings. We believe in the transparency. The championships committee doesn't agree with us. We respect their decision, but I think we'll continue to fight for that.
We will get to that in just a minute, but if I'm not wrong, please correct me. We have 3 regional rankings, 2 public, 1 private, or is it 4, 3 public, 1 private?
3 public, 1 private.
Okay, so we're looking at a 4th one publicly if we could, whether that's the final one or earlier on. But let's talk about that. The men's committee, I know over the years, has fought for the last regional rankings and the data associated with it to be released to the general public. We had it released not that many years ago. I believe it was 3 or so many years ago. That was the tact. Things have changed. Some committees in Division III from other sports have asked those information not be released. In my opinion, it is a minority of that group. You've reiterated what I've already known. Men's basketball is for this. What are the steps to get that changed? Where's the resistance?
I think the resistance is with the championships committee. I think there is a concern that by releasing this information, you expose the committee to questioning the wrath of people and really questioning the decision-making process. So there's part of me that thinks it may be just to protect the committee members. We've taken the position that we want everyone to know this is how we arrived at the decisions. We welcome your questions, but we feel very strongly about the decisions we made, the bracket we're putting together, and have at it.
Have you talked to anybody who's against it?
Not in our committee, no.
But I mean in general, in your meetings at the NCAA, do you run into people who have been against it?
Yes, I have.
Have you pointed out to them, and this is my opinion I'm putting in here, that by hiding it, they're actually opening themselves up to more questions?
Working with Indianapolis has always been a challenge. Like I said, our committee is butting heads with championships and what we would like to see happen and what they think is necessary for all the championship sports in Division III. We have not been able to get them off the position of they'd rather not make this public. And we'll continue to fight, but I don't know anything more than that.
Interesting enough, we're going in order of my questions, which is rather interesting. Let's get back to the criteria. The biggest question everybody has is the strength of schedule numbers. Last year, the NCAA changed how the SOS was calculated, not in the formula, but in the specifics. Instead of taking a team's overall record against regional teams, they went and did the math specifically on every single team. And of course, the men's basketball, we have this 1.25 weighted average for away games. You have a 0.75 for home games, 1.0 for neutral games. And in the general math, it made a difference. But last year it was revealed by many of the sabermetric guys who are in Division III that we appreciate, that by going to the specific math, it wiped out the 1.25. It wiped out the 0.75. And in reality, your strength of schedule had no weighted effort whatsoever. It was way too late to change things then. What has happened in the offseason? Is there a change? Have the NCAA statistical guys realized the flaw?
During our committee meetings in June and our calls leading up to the start of the season, we have not discussed any changes that have been made. I know the statistical service has been working on that, but we have not had any discussions with them on their math and any changes that would be made for the upcoming season.
When will that discussion take place?
I know we have another conference call with the National Committee in December. We'll be asking the questions, but at this point, with the fall seasons wrapping up, we have not been able to really get much of an answer.
Of course, those out there are going to ask this question, so I'll ask it as well. Is there a reason that wasn't brought up over the summer?
I know it just never appeared on the agenda. I don't know if it was properly vetted through the NCAA. It was a concern that, as you mentioned, a lot of fans of Division III basketball had brought up on the chat boards at d3boards.com, etc. But I'm not sure it ever got to the right people at the NCAA to put it on the agenda. My years of following D3 hoops, I've monitored the boards, I've seen it, but I'm not sure even I realized the magnitude that it could have.
Along that, you can meet them in December. You know the magnitude now. You know how basically you have no weighted measure at this point in time. So your SOS numbers are exactly the same as women's basketball. And we should point out, by the way, that on the men's basketball side of things, they are a few who do the weighted math. Not everybody is doing it. It's a minority in cases. But with that magnitude, is there an emphasis in December to say, can we fix this? We've got a month until our first regional ranking.
I think what we need to do is reach out to the stat service and say, okay, if the sabermetricians are right, then we need to do something about it. If they're not, explain to me why they're not.
Yeah, prove to us why they're wrong.
So once again, so we can answer the question ahead of time, as opposed to waiting until the first rankings come out in February and then bring them into question with only three weeks remaining.
By the way, you should warn them, these guys all went to Division III schools. They're pretty smart.
Unfortunately, that's the problem of working with smart schools.
Yeah, exactly. So again, now another thing about the SOS is they're adding a non-conference SOS opponent to this. So if you played 3 games out of conference, you played 10 games out of conference, that separate SOS number regarding just non-conference games is going to be added to the primary criteria, if I'm not mistaken. How big of a step is that? What is that going to do to help your committees?
You hear a lot of times when you have double round robin, particularly in basketball, that conference SOS generally pulls toward 500.
Yeah.
So I think, as we mentioned earlier, any additional information that can be pulled out and allow us to consider, I think, is very important. I think when the AQs were put in place, I think it was a good thing for Division III. It helps some schools not have to travel to chase down a tournament bid. It still allowed schools that felt the need to travel for alumni events or something traditional like Lopata Classic that schools want to be a part of. You're willing to travel for that, but you didn't feel the need to chase down the AQ or the berth of the tournament. I think that's good. But I think with the non-conference SOS, it does encourage you to maybe test the boundaries of your region and go out and play quality teams, because we'll be looking at that come selection time.
Talking to Steve Ulrich again, committee chair for the men's basketball championship committee. Of course, he's also the commissioner for the Centennial Conference. We're here at Franklin and Marshall. Let's talk about the 70% regional game rule that has gone into effect now. So all games will count in your record. There won't be a regional record per se, unless you don't hit the 70% rule, as it were. You have to play 70% of your games in region. And by the way, the conference tournament cannot count towards that. Have you already seen effects of that? Are there schools that have already said, we've got a problem?
The schools that really are concerned about it are, for lack of a better phrase, the outliers in Division III.
Absolutely.
You look at the Northwest Conference, you look at the Southern California, the challenges
even the Hope Calvins.
Michigan faces. Those are the issues I think that we'll have to deal with. And I think because this is 70% across the board in all sports in Division III, that I think there may be waivers entertained if someone would be close, especially given the travel situations in those regions.
Well, per that, have there been waivers that you've been aware of that have been put in place yet?
Not per se for the basketball game. Nothing's come to my attention yet, but I have seen those that have come forth in other sports.
So now that all the games count, but we still have regional committees, that seems like a challenge to me, that the regional committees now have to dive into these numbers a little bit more, when it may be a team not even close to their region. So what's the mandate to the RACs now per this?
Well, I think we need to be consistent with the mandate to the RACs. Here's the criteria. Here's the latitude we're willing to give you to make the best decisions possible to rank them accordingly. If you feel that looking at the non-conference SOS helps you get to that point, that's a good thing. If it helps that you see an out-of-region game against a quality opponent, does that help you get to where you need to be? That's not a bad thing. It may not be spelled out in the criteria, but I do think it's vital that we use the information available.
But it does change the regional record.
It does.
The regional record could essentially, in all purposes, be the overall record.
Correct.
So that obviously takes the overall record out of the equation in the secondary criteria to some extent. But in the primary, now they're looking at a regional record. That's their overall record. They have to dive into those numbers. Is there any concern that's come up that that's going to be a challenge in some ways? Because you may not appreciate what that number really means.
Not at this point. It may raise its head, earlier in midway through the season as we make some of our decisions. But I think our racks are up to it.
And finally, when is it determined that the team has met or not met the 70%? Is it the schedule that they have turned into the NCAA prior to the season beginning, or is it somewhere down the road? Again, we don't have to worry about the conference tournament being a factor here, so we know the schedule. So at what point does that schedule and whether they've played enough games actually, there's your deadline. If you haven't met it, you're not in compliance?
To the best of my knowledge, it is the schedule that is turned in. That's what we'll be able to look at first and say, okay, we have a problem here. Let's call and find out if there's a reason why, and delve a little bit deeper.
Of course, that makes my next question. There's teams who do tournaments, little 2-team tournaments. They don't know that second game, so there's got to be, I suspect, somewhere down the road where that can be readjusted.
Once again, for the larger conferences, in a lot of respects, I think
conferences are taking up that.
That yes. will take up the 70% of the games. You're right. The tournaments are an issue, but I think the mandate from the NCAA is that the school should take that into account. So when you bring 3 teams into your tournament, or you go to visit a tournament, at
least get a regional game.
That possibility exists.
Okay. Any changes to the regional rankings overall? We kind of touched on we're not going to get an extra one out of that. Are there any other changes that may be coming?
Not
pretty much the same status quo.
Same moving forward.
Let's get to some topics that I know you have, that the committee dove into. There was a lot of success in Atlanta. People really thought that ended up being much better than anyone anticipated, and we at D3 Hoops were certainly thrilled at what happened and changed our minds on the idea. I know in the offseason, the men's basketball committee made 2 decisions that they wanted changed outside of all the sabermetrics. Mm-hmm. You wanted the Elite 8 back in Salem like we had last year. You wanted that as soon as this year. And then you want to go back to the Final Four, not this year, but the following season, ahead of the women. If anyone's curious, women are going to be doing a Final Four in a couple of years. That was presented to the Championships Committee. What happened from there?
The Championships Committee, first of all, with the possibility of an Elite 8 in this season, the Championships Committee was concerned about the budgetary constraints that were placed on the Division III budget and did not feel that this year that would be possible to do. They did want to consider it as a item that needs to be considered by the Administrative Council, a Management Council in Division III for 15 and beyond. So that consideration is there for 2015, 2014, 15, 15, 16. So that's still in play. The committee is unanimous in its belief that because of the success last year in Atlanta, the national final, if possible, could be played in conjunction with Division I Final Four. And it was our hopes that would be played in Indianapolis in 2015. As of right now, there is no movement toward that. There is a great deal of resistance at the governance level in Division III because what was presented to them when they agreed to allow Atlanta to happen was that it was a one-time special occasion 75th anniversary thing. So because it was presented that way, there are a number of people in the Championships Management Council and President's Council that feel that no, this was not something we would consider year after year going forward. This doesn't mean that we're not going to continue to push. We know that Division I and Division II are talking about doing a joint championship in Indianapolis. Division II is pretty much committed. They have said, if you'll have us Division I, we'll be there. So we have 3 different governing structures working independently of one another, trying to go through all the proper steps and the proper protocol to move things forward. So I've talked with Dan Gavitt at the NCAA, and we're hopeful. I'm not incredibly optimistic for 15, but we are trying to get this moving forward for future years.
Of course, that would mean a change to the season. And I know you guys have presented a change to the season. Moving the start of the season a few weeks, what was your proposal on those lines?
If you're a naysayer to the Division III National Championship game at the Division I Final Four, we hear people say, well, last year's championship was 6 weeks, that's too long.
Yeah.
No kidding.
Yeah.
We all know that was told. We didn't even want it to be stretched out over 6 weeks, one game, 3 in Salem.
Right.
So to avoid that, and when you look at the calendar for future years, there's 5 weeks between what would traditionally be the start of the Division III tournament and the end of the Division I Final Four. We suggested, why don't we move basketball 1 week later? Essentially not starting November 15th, perhaps moving that back to November 22nd, the Friday before Thanksgiving. Try to work it out. Take the 19-week playing and practice season for basketball and sliding it closer to the Division I Final Four. Now there may be 4 weeks lag time between the start of the Division III tournament and the Division I Final Four, but certainly that's better than having 5 weeks, and maybe by doing so, we might be able to convince those who would like to see us in conjunction with Division I to allow it to happen.
Of course, the other question I have regarding all this is there's been talk of equality with the women's side. Again, the women will have this in 2016. Of course, Indy would have been a perfect place for this all to happen. But again, did anyone consider, when they said we were told this was a one-time deal, that if it was successful, they were going to hear about it?
That's a great question, and I don't know the answer to. As you know, you were there, the D3 Hoops crew was there, and there were a lot of naysayers. And I don't think a number of us believed that the NCAA would follow through and make it the event that it turned into.
Sure.
The fact that they did whetted our appetites and showed that this is something that we all would like to be part of in the future. I think it just caught so many people off guard that I don't think they were prepared for us to come back and say, we're ready to do it in 14, we're ready to do it 15. The women's final, Division III Women's Championship game will be played as part of the Division I Final Four in 2016. So there's some discussions there, should the men be allowed to do it a second time before the women do it at all? My argument would be Division I, II, and III men's lacrosse are together, and it's not dependent on whether or not Division III women's lacrosse is part of the Division I event. So, as I mentioned to you before, for me, as a commissioner, you work with 11 different colleges and universities, you work with 24 sports, so you never really want to be seen as favoring one school or one sport over another. Being the men's basketball chair is a completely different experience for me because I get to champion one sport. So this is one that I feel very passionately about, and I don't want to see us lose the opportunity that's before us. If Division I will have us, why would we not want to be part of that? I hear people say that it's not, we'd lose the Division III flavor. We'd be swallowed up by Division I, and we don't want to be part of that. Our Final Four right now in Salem is always held on the opening weekend of the Division I tournament. I would contend that we're almost swallowed up by that. We're a great many of basketball fans from around the country who would tune in to see a Division III game are looking for Cinderella on Thursday or Friday night. Well,
of course, the more interesting thing is now it'll be conference championships in Division I.
Right.
So we're a weekend early, which would have happened last year. We just didn't experience it because of the change of the schedule. A couple more questions here for Steve Ulrich, who is committee chair for the Men's Basketball Committee and conference commissioner for the Centennial Conference. And that kind of gets me to my next question. The Centennial Conference is one of those conferences like the NESCAC that starts their basketball practices later than the October 15 not mandate, but date that the NCAA puts in place that is the earliest that you can start practices. I have been of the adage that that's been a disadvantage, but I've now changed my opinion, and you may get this on a Hoopsville rant down the road here on the show today, that needs to change a little bit, that maybe basketball has too many practices. You start looking at other sports, and the practice availability from basketball has far more than football, soccer, field hockeys, lacrosse, you name them. Nobody has as many practices as basketball has. I know why the Centennial has their mandate. I know when the NESCAC, we're not going to get into that. My question is, has there been any talk about shifting the date and maybe not having a full month of practices before the opening game?
Nothing's come from the membership or playing and practice seasons at the NCAA. As commissioners, we talk often about, as you mentioned, soccer has 16 dates of practice. Field hockey, the same in the fall. They're really bound by the number of practice opportunities, and because of safety reasons, there's a lot of concern that they shouldn't be playing as early as they do. Right. Then you look at 3 weeks of football has, trying to get 120 players or more for the more successful Division III programs. They get 3 weeks.
And 2-a-days have been limited.
They get 25 days to get their teams ready. We give basketball, 27, 28 practice days to get 15 players ready? You're right. I think there is some concern that we may not be doing right, maybe not to take away from basketball, but maybe we're not doing right by some of the other sports, and maybe there is a better number out there.
Again, as committee chair, we mentioned this at the beginning, not a basketball background, not a coach who's come up through the ranks. Certainly you know basketball, but not a coach who's come up through the ranks. This is the first time we've had a committee chair who doesn't have that background in a long time. I tried to figure it out, and I haven't been able to. But it's been a significant amount of time that we haven't had essentially a coach who's been committee chair. I'm sure you knew that going in. From your point of view, what kind of pressure does that put on you? From your point of view, what spotlight do you think will be shined on you that is different than others?
I think the thing that I really need to make sure that I do is reach out to the NABC and make sure that they understand that I want to work in conjunction with them, make them feel comfortable that we're moving the sport Division III men's basketball forward. You know, I look at Charlie Brock, I look at Paige Moyer, Pat Cunningham. Those are quality individuals, and I've gotten a chance to know them over the last 2 years with my involvement with the committee, and I think that we're going to be able to build a relationship. So if there is any concern out there that, you know, Steve hasn't been a basketball coach, right, therefore does he really have our best interests at heart, that we can put that any feelings of that aside.
Do you realize this may open you up to more criticism from people because of the lack of basketball background, even though you have a committee of 7 other people?
Absolutely, but I also think I come from a unique situation. When you're a conference commissioner, you're taking slings and arrows all the time. So in some respects, you get criticized for decisions you make in your own conference with your own sports a great deal. So something like this coming from basketball coaches would be maybe a little bit different, but nothing I haven't gotten used to.
Steve Ulrich, again, men's committee chair and the commissioner of the Centennial Conference. As we talk, it's 2 days. As the show airs, it's 1 day till we tip off the season. How much are you looking forward to this campaign?
Very excited. Very excited. As you mentioned, we're located here. Our office is located here on the Franklin and Marshall campus, and one of the top games in Division III will be here on Friday night, 6 o'clock, when Middlebury and Alvernia tip off. I had a chance to see both of those during the tournament run last year. I'm excited to see them play each other and play here, and the possibility of playing either Franklin and Marshall and Baruch in the final. It's time for the ball to go up, and it's time for us to begin putting our plan in action for how we're going to do our work for the year. It's an exciting time.
By the way, a shameless plug, if you want to see some other good basketball, the following weekend, come down to Stevenson for the Hoopsville Classic. We got some Elite 8 matchups there. So you're right, the opening game here is going to be spectacular, but shamelessly plugging, Hoopsville Classic is going to have some good games as well. Before we let you go, I always give the guests the final word. Any final thoughts, and in your case, I'm going to change it a little bit, that you want to make sure you present to the Division III fans? If you want, you can even look in the camera, but to the Division III fans out there as you take over as committee chair here.
I think it's important to know that we want to move the game of Division III men's basketball forward as a committee. And as I mentioned, the opportunities in the postseason, being part of the Division I Final Four, are important to us. We want to make sure that if the window is open for us to be part of that we can be part of that, but we don't want to lose sight of our main focus, which is putting together the best championship possible with the best teams we can put in the best bracket. And I'm excited for the season. I know you are, and we appreciate all the work that, Dave, you do, and everyone at D3 Hoops. You do a wonderful job in promoting the game, and we're ready to go.
Very good. Well, thank you for the kind words. He's Steve Ulrich from the men's committee chair. Of course, he's also the commissioner of the Centennial Conference, if you have not picked up on that throughout. Again, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. We will talk to him, I suspect, a few more times this year. We especially will be talking to you at the end of the year. We have plenty more Hoopsville up ahead, so stay tuned. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at D3Hoopsville or using the hashtag Hoopsville, Facebook.com/Hoopsville. Email us at Hoopsville@D3Hoops.com. Of course, there's a chat room alongside the video player as well. More Hoopsville ahead. You're listening to Hoopsville, presented by D3Hoops.com. We'll be back after this.